Georgia. Obviously, they still have the college football playoff. They're likely going to have a chance to win another national title. It's not a pick, but we're just saying they're the number one seed. All right, call a spade a spade. Number 2 class right now in the On3 team consensus recruiting rankings, 23 total commits.
Yeah.
Set the table for me a little bit with the Bulldogs as we get closer to signing day.
Well, Georgia is, guess what, looking to finish strong. Go figure. But they picked up, and they started about a week ago on Sunday, 2 Sundays ago, when they landed 5-star IMG edge Samuel Mpimba. That was a big pickup coming off the edge, but they are not done. Georgia started trending on the recruiting prediction machine this week for 5-star edge Damon Wilson out of Venice, Florida, overtaking Ohio State this week. What it looked like was going to be, okay, Georgia picks up Samuel Mpimba, their 5-star edge. 5-star edge Keon Keeley goes to Alabama, and 5-star edge Damon Wilson goes to Ohio State, right? Everybody gets a little bit of 5-star edge action. Well, UGA's being greedy, and right now it looks like on signing day, they are trending in that direction, at least I should say, for Damon Wilson, a 5-star edge. The day after signing day, 4-star defensive lineman Jordan Hall, an interior guy, he's going to be making his decision, and that comes down to another SEC battle between UF and Georgia, a heated one because UF really needs an interior defensive lineman. UGA, they're just being greedy. They just want all the top players, so they're going to go after him. Then an intriguing prospect that we've been talking about here in the office a lot is 5-star athlete Nicholas Harbor. He's a track star. So he's not in a rush to make his decision. He runs track in the spring, so he'll be announcing his decision in February. That's going to be interesting. And then you also have Sadir Mitchell. He's a 4-star defensive lineman that is currently committed to Texas, that has been flirting with Georgia, and Kirby Smart is looking to make a big flip when he makes his final decision. It's going to be interesting. Also, Daniel Harris, he's another name to mention. He's a top 150 DB that decommitted from Georgia. Chad Simmons thinks that they have a good shot at retaining him. You don't always see that with players that decommit from a school. You very rarely see them go back, but there's a chance that Georgia could close with him as well. I know we say that Alabama has that number 1 class taken care of right now, but if Georgia can make a few of these things go their way, and how could I forget the number 1 tight end in the nation as well, Deuce Robinson out of Arizona. The number 1 tight end in the nation is looking at Georgia. The proof of concept there with Brock Bowers has Deuce interested. There is some way that potentially, now Alabama would probably have to lose somebody as a surprise, but it would be fun to see Georgia make a run at that number 1 spot.
And I mean, they're pushing, like you said, they're building in the trenches. A lot of guys that could commit, or the RPM is trending towards them committing. They just have a wealth of riches on the defensive line and guys that we've seen them develop over the years. And that was really the difference in the Tennessee game. I know Tennessee fans are going to hate to hear that, but what we talked about so much after that game ended was, yes, Tennessee is extremely talented. They are building a program, but you saw the byproduct of multiple 5-star class upon 5-star class on 5-star class in the trenches pay dividends on that Saturday. Now, I want to ask you this, Josh. Like you said, Alabama currently the number 1 team in the On3 consensus team recruiting rankings, Georgia at 2. Let's just say they finish 1 and 2 respectively. How big of a difference is it to have the number 1 class versus the number 2 class in your estimation?
Not very big if you look at the class that Alabama's bringing in, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, it's a top class even for Nick Saban. So Alabama's doing something incredible. Georgia's doing something incredible. And you got to remember, Georgia's been doing this. Like, they've been stacking classes. They've been winning football games. If they finish at number 2 this year, we're splitting hairs. It's an incredible class. Both Georgia and Alabama, both top classes. I think they're well on their way to continuing their rise as possibly the next college football dynasty.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, the whole conversation around number 1 versus number 2, that definitely makes sense. Like, I guess you still have 5-star guys stacked up regardless. But I wanted to get your thoughts on this because we heard Nick Saban this past offseason talk about A&M beating them in recruiting in regards to rankings. How much do coaches care about rankings versus like, hey, let's just get our guys? And if our guys ends up being a number 7 ranked class versus the number 1 ranked class, so be it. Does rankings play a factor for these coaches in your mind, Josh?
I've talked to coaches, assistant coaches. Now, head coaches, probably not. I've talked to assistant coaches in college football that have told me They have incentives in their contract based on the recruiting site's rankings.
Wow, interesting.
So there are coaches out there that not only care, but are financially incentivized to land top talent.
That's
I don't know
awesome.
if that goes
Wow.
on everywhere
Okay.
in the country, but I have had conversations. I don't think head coaches really look at it too much. Now, it does help to build hype around your program. So you always want to get the best players, but ultimately, do they care about the rankings? No, they care more about what's on their war room recruiting boards than what is on our star rankings. However, there's something that correlates, because we generally see with our top ranked players, that's where the most offers are, that's where the most interested, that's where the most competition is. So I think, yes, ultimately these coaches do want to have top rated classes, but I don't know if they necessarily look at the rankings the same way fans look at the rankings.
And especially in the SEC for Georgia, going back and forth now with Alabama for a lot of these top guys, like you would have to imagine maybe they have him as the number 1 defensive lineman and Georgia has him as the number 2 defensive lineman. Like at the end of the day, both these coaches, both Saban and Coach Smart, they want him on their roster. Like at the end of the day, that's kind of the fact of the matter. So I think that's really interesting, though, what you said, the financial incentive in different contracts. That's what you call inside scoop. That's inside scoop right there, folks. You don't get that anywhere else if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel. Do you need another reason to besides that? I don't think so. I'll get you out of here with this, Josh. We've taken a ton of your time, and it's about time you get to just lay down and have a drink of water. What is the expectation for you from Georgia in regards to the transfer portal? Because they haven't been super active historically. What do you think will be their move this coming season?
Add a couple pieces.
Okay.
I think Georgia's at the point where when you're recruiting number 1 player at your position after number 1 player at your position, you kind of got to let that marinate a little bit. You don't want to rock the boat too much. Like what we were saying about Deion Sanders, not caring, just bring infusion of talent, infuse it as much as you can. Georgia, you got to have a little bit of rhythm to your rhyme when you're recruiting the portal, because you don't want some of these recruits that you spent a lot of time, money, and resources on to leave. That's a waste. You spent all this time recruiting them. You spent all this time evaluating. Now they're on your roster. You've invested strength and conditioning time with them. You want to keep that investment and get them through your ranks, because it helps with culture. You bring a freshman in as a freshman and he's in your program for 3-4 years. Those are the guys that help set the culture in the locker room. So I think when it comes to Georgia and how they pick to the portal, it's a little bit different than a lot of teams. They're looking for a little cherry on top instead of a massive infusion of talent.
It's one of those things, too, where it's like, hey, you already got the number 1 guy at that position out of high school. Like, you already won. You already have the best option probably for next season in-house. He was just a backup last year getting developed. So I'm curious to see if we see them treat the portal how Alabama did this past season, adding just premier players like a Jahmyr Gibbs, and I think Jermaine Burton they were hoping to get a little bit more out of. He's going to come back and see if they get more return on investment there. But that's kind of the thought process that I think we could see from Georgia. But what you said is exactly right. Adding pieces and not getting too ahead of yourself and letting that top talent that you already acquired on the recruiting trail marinate just a little bit. Well, Josh, host of the Inside Scoop, national recruiting analyst for us here at On3. You do a phenomenal job. Appreciate you letting us take so much of your time. And what do you say we do it again real soon? Another live show tomorrow. Get ready for National Signing Day. Sound good?
Do it live, JD.
We'll do it live.
Do it live.
Appreciate it, Josh. Have a great one, brother.
See ya.
Hey, y'all. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.